U.S. intelligence agency mind control.
The students keep asking, what should we do next? What can we accomplish? I feel so sad. Because how can I tell them that what we are actually hoping for is bloodshed? For the moment when the government has no choice but to brazenly butcher the people. Only when the square is awash with blood will the people of China open their eyes. Only then will they really be united.
Oh, is this the fake China thing? Okay, hang on.
But how can I explain any of...
Okay, so let's make predictions on what this video actually is, okay?
Okay.
So I think, and this is really going out on a limb to give him a lot of credit, okay?
Mm.
So I think this is just going to be a misleading video that basically says that there was no killing inside the square and never brings up what happened outside the square.
Yeah.
And then
that's what I was thinking as well.
So I think that's the most likely. If he does acknowledge it, it will be a fake out right in the beginning where he said, okay, it did happen, but it didn't happen inside the square. Yeah. And we're talking about how imperialism makes it seem like it's something that didn't happen. And the rest of it will just be about how there was no violence inside the square.
Maybe.
I saw the cable. I saw the WikiLeaks cable, like somewhere in the thumbnail or something.
Yeah. He's definitely going to blame the US and call it a color revolution at some point.
This to my fellow students.
Who cares?
And what is truly...
He's gonna justify the state terror, and he's gonna blame the students.
But like, no. Like, who cares if it was a color revolution? Who cares if the U.S. is behind the revolution? Does that justify the massacres?
Exactly. It's wholly irrelevant, but to them it justifies it. Because as I've come to understand, is these people don't see China, Russia as imperialist because they're against
Lenin
America.
said that because Lenin overthrew an empire, right?
No, it's because they're against America.
I'm being dead serious here. This is their rationale. Lenin overthrew the imperial Russia, right? So Lenin had a lot to say about imperialism because he was talking about the imperial empire that he just overthrew, right? So it's actually something that's very much in the context of Leninism, of this anti-imperialism. You know, Lenin wasn't really so much like, he died pretty much not that long after the revolution.
Yes, he basically automatically died, which is what set Stalin into motion.
It's really hard to label him as an imperialist. It's really no different than the French Revolution in this regard, as in like Napoleon came in because of the French Revolution. Napoleon would have never risen to power without the French Revolution.
Yes, because there was the February Revolution, then the October Revolution when it really happened.
So like, revolutionary France still had colonies. It was still an empire. It was still imperialist, but their policies weren't really concerned with imperialism. It was more concerned with killing their own people to stabilize their own country in their twisted view of counter-revolutionaries. So it's imperialistic on territories that were already under the empire.
But the other thing is, like, I think it's fair to say Lenin was an imperialist. He didn't get the opportunity to.
What I would say, I think it's fair to argue that he's not, though.
Yeah, no, 100%, because there is no action that he made that was imperialist. The Soviet Union was imperialist under Stalin. Like the expansion of the Soviet Union post World War II is imperialism. Like it or not, it's imperialism. You can cope and explain it away however you want. The Soviet Union's territory and the Union in and of itself, with Russia at their head, imperialism.
Sad is that some students and some famous, well-connected people are working hard to help the
government.
government.
That's funny. Black Redguard had a great Bolshevik post.
Really?
Yeah, it was.
Also, Stalin is notorious for like annexing non-ethnic Russians to other areas, like Central Asia, for example. You want to talk about imperialism? Let's talk about how Central Asia is mostly Russian-speaking. Yeah, that doesn't happen from non-imperialism.
to prevent it from taking such measures.
This is Chai Ling, the self-declared supreme leader of the Tiananmen Square protests. We'll get back to her soon. How about this, then? Tank Man is usually presented to Western audiences as some regular, brave guy standing up to a ruthless, authoritarian regime.
He
what
was.
I'm told is that A, these are tanks leaving the square, and the man is standing in their way, and
People
B,
know
that
this.
there is video footage of this event, and what is always implied, that this man is ran over by the tank, never happened. Instead, he climbs atop,
nobody implies that.
Nobody says he was run over by the tank. It's
People know that
him.
he was pulled away from other people, and nobody knows who he is. If he
Yeah,
was run over by the tank, guess what we'd have?
Everybody
His
would know
identity.
who he is. Yes. He got disappeared the fuck out of that country. He is no longer existing.
Well, people pulled him
and
away.
starts chatting with the soldiers.
We don't know
in
if
popular
what
media, the
actually
widely
came from
recognized
him.
narrative of the Tiananmen Square massacre is typically presented as follows. In June of 1989, the Chinese government imposed martial law and deployed the military to quell a pro-democracy and freedom protest led by students. Troops and tanks entered Tiananmen Square and opened fire on unarmed protesters, resulting in the deaths and injuries of hundreds, if not thousands, of people. Some of the more exaggerated versions of the story include claims of tanks crushing students and machine guns being fired into the crowd, with bodies littering the square.
God damn,
All of the
this
above is a
motherfucker
lie.
posts a lot.
It never happened. So what did? Back to the video in just a second. Okay, first some background. Deng Xiaoping's economic
That was weird.
happened. So what did?
What? An ad was cut out?
The video in just a second. Okay, first some background.
Oh, wait. So you mean to tell me that an ad was cut out of this video in post because the ad holder probably was like, we don't want to be associated with this fucking genocide denialism.
That is almost
out of your video.
Almost exactly what happened. I guarantee it.
Xiaoping's economic reform.
Or he gave them an incorrect version that they okayed and then uploaded the real version, and then they were like, take this fucking ad out of the video.
Reforms in the late 70s shook up China's economy by introducing free market reforms, creating large gaps between the rich and poor, unsurprisingly, and bringing with it some very blatant forms of corruption.
And now all you people claim that that is exactly what raised them out of poverty. You use the same fucking statistic that you just quoted for wealth disparity to claim that they rose people out of poverty. Isn't that funny? I love how we can use two different statistics to say two different things. This is great.
Reforms likewise scaled back welfare programs and relaxed price controls. This massively benefited Chinese farmers, of which there are a lot, and led to increased crop yield and spending by them, which, predictably in a market economy, caused inflation, mostly affecting urban dwellers. Students and urbanites expressed a certain sense of superiority, you could call it, over rural citizens, and were not happy to see peasants and farmers do better than them, even less so foreigners. Following cuts to tuition subsidies, students began protesting the presence of African exchange students. Like most foreign students, the Africans enjoyed greater standards of living in China, and some dated local women. Among the signs in the crowd,
maybe he didn't post this, or maybe he deleted it, or maybe I'm thinking of somebody else, but it was something like, hear about like a cool Bolshevik, and why haven't I heard of this person? Goes to Google, died in the coup, or died in like 1937 or when they all did or something.
Yeah. No, I did see that tweet actually.
So it does exist.
This is an interesting framing.
Maybe
that I
he
haven't
spelt
seen
it
before.
wrong.
He's literally framing it as these students are bad people, so you shouldn't be mad about it. Incredible.
Okay, so it's they deserved it now. It didn't happen, and if it did, they deserved it.
Yeah, that's what we're getting with. Also, if you're complaining about the racism of the students, should I bring up the ad of the black guy being washed and coming out Chinese? Like, or how about all the TikToks where Chinese people get African children to quote Chinese that they don't understand, where they're calling them monkeys and shit like that? Are we okay with this? Mandated, or not mandated, but like in association with the Chinese state? Like, are we okay with this? Are we fine with this, or is it only the students' racism that we're mad about here? I've been saying China's a racist ethno state for a hot minute now. Like, this is not new. China's racism is not new. East Asian racism is not new. Like, this is a well-known fact.
1988, were placards demanding greater democracy, alongside ones proclaiming death to the Black Devils. I don't think you've ever seen this in any of the commemorations. The political discussion of the era was very complex and spanned the entire political spectrum, of course. That's not surprising, China is a massive country. The liberal narrative, though, centers on Hu Yaobang, a popular reform leader who at that point had been a key advocate for political liberalization within the Chinese government.
Well, okay, hang on. Here's what doesn't make sense, okay? Communists have to decide one way or the other. Is Denganism American imperialism? Was he American dog who opened up China to American interest? or were the Americans backing the coup against him in Tiananmen Square? Which way is it?
Yeah, make your mind up.
1989 sparked student protests, as many within that particular movement saw his demise as the end of a hope for Western-style liberal political reform. In the following days, the China Democratic Alliance, a U.S.-based organization which wanted the outright establishment of capitalism in China,
Here we
issued
go.
an open letter to Chinese university students, which was posted at many Beijing schools at the time, advising that the complete negation of the anti-liberalization movement of 1987 should be used as a breakthrough point.
Wait, you mean during a protest movement, an organization encouraged protests?
Crazy. We're anti-protest now?
Mm-hmm.
Pro-state terror, anti-protest.
You mean to tell me that the person said they were going to firebomb a Walmart and then did it? That would not be communism then, because they talked about firebombing a Walmart and then did it. It's only communism if you talk about it and then don't do anything.
Regardless, students of a particular class background began to gather in
Tiananmen
Square.
Oh, wow. Guess what? Lenin even said this. Okay.
Mhm.
Who leads the protest? It's never the poor.
It's
Lenin,
the students.
What's very interesting with the French Revolution, which we'll eventually do a show on, right? Is that it mirrors this whole notion that the liberal college elites are going to make the kids revolutionary and revolt, right? Because the part of the reason that made the French Revolution possible is that these people were educating, some more rural people.
Yeah, yes, and they became class conscious because of education.
Where else did this happen?
Everywhere in Russia.
Specifically Russia and France. These are two specific things.
Isn't it also funny that Lenin, the educated man, decided to make a vanguard party and speak for people?
Well, because they were uneducated.
Yeah, because they were uneducated, right? He propositioned himself as the hierarchical front man for the socialist revolution.
My favorite is the French Revolution, when the people are like, hey, you actually don't represent us. They're like, hey, we got a solution. We'll take another high-class dude and say he's your representative now. That was the best.
Great. So good.
And it was like an actor or something. I don't remember who.
Literally, essentially the same thing as Lenin.
And that guy was like extra bloodthirsty.
Yeah. My favorite part about Lenin is that it wasn't so much an altruism thing. It was, they're all idiots. I'm smarter. I know more than you. Like how we joke with that.
Well, that's
I know
why
more
this
than
whole
you
thing
meme.
with Soviets, or not Soviets, but the commies and stuff. They have this whole idea of we just need to educate people.
But they're actually anti-education and anti-educated
but they want to
people.
educate people on why their system is perfect and why you should give up everything inside your own system. Where it's like the philosophy that they're drawing on. This is what I say all the time with like Marx and stuff, that it's outdated, right? So like you need modern people who are writing philosophy for the modern times. And like even Richard Wolff is more credible than Lenin now. You know what I'm saying? Like Richard Wolff is a better guy to hear from and learn from than anything that you would read from Lenin.
I mean, this is why I always say that
by the way, if we show commies me saying that, they will lose their fucking mind.
It's all right. This will be clipped. Don't
worry.
But
like his argument about like Mondragon being being for like how communist is not like it's a good argument, and it's very surface level, and you need to learn more after that. But hey, Lenin is supposed to be the introduction that other people are telling you to fucking read, along with the fucking manifesto pamphlet.
But this is why I always say when people talk about Marx and they keep using Marx, the man wrote this shit in the mid-1800s.
Literally before we had anti-monopoly as like a government policy that existed.
Like it's peak industrialization. It's
for
a different time.
Imperial era. Because like you have to think, like this is when Abraham Lincoln was around, my guy. You know what I'm saying?
Like this is like Marx is outdated and shallow analysis that was great for the time, but is now not worth looking at.
It's like
you want to look at
as
Marx's
far away
work,
from us now as Marx was from the American Revolution. It's pretty much the same amount of distance. And to think that I mean,
little bit more.
technically, there are a lot of ideas in the American Revolution that did still exist, like the Leviathan theory, but that was already brought upon on. So, like, that's the thing is like there's parts, and then there's parts of socialism and progressivism that integrated from Marx's ideas as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not like Leviathan theory is perfectly scripted out inside the Magna Carta.
No, but it is just like there are better things to look at for a modern age, and like as I said, if you're wanting to read Marx, read Öcalan. It's much better source.
This dude we were making fun of today?
No, is this on Twitter?
It's called X now. There's just some guy who said something about Öcalan, and I just said Lamau, and the dude lost his mind over it.
Why?
So like, it's not like I bothered reading the conversation. So this is the so. I thought this said doctor for a second, like it was like a PhD. So it says democratic confederalism is just soft Marxist Leninism, soft in every sense of the word, including how unradical its critique of capitalism is, I would assume. It's a social democracy comparable to Chavismo, which I assume is, I assume this is, I've never heard it expressed this way. Let me check Chavismo, because I would think that's like Bolivarianism.
Sure.
Yeah. So. Left wing.
Oh my God.
On December the 6th,
associated with Hugo Chavez. It's Bolivarianism, okay? You come over to my wife's house, you get her name right. Nothing to do with Marxism, and even less to do with anarchism. And I just quote tweeted Lamau, and he writes, I love the people's capitalism and the people's corporations. And I wrote, congrats. And then he said, the people's market. I didn't even read this before. The people's market on socialist wages. Basically, socialism is when everyone is bourgeoisie, and stuff socialism is Switzerland's political system plus co-ops. Spelt like coups. And I said, ain't reading that. And he said, you ain't reading because you can't read for shit. I said, cry about it, I guess.
Amazing.
Like, I just like, it's soft this. It's soft that. Like, bro, shut the fuck up. Like, do you understand nobody wants to listen to you? Like, if I
don't think they do.
If I guarantee, okay, so if I walked up to somebody and I said something along the lines of socialism, and I said, here, read the Communist Manifesto, and without any introduction to political theory, they'd be like, no. But like, if I presented multiple Öcalan books to them, they would immediately be like, oh, I'll actually read this. This looks interesting.
Yeah, true. Because it's also new as well. Nobody really knows about it.
Like, the Communist Manifesto is easy to read, but like, the terms in it never took off.
Yeah.
Stop using them.
Complete negation of the anti-liberalization movement of 1987 should be used as a breakthrough point. For those that can't read between the lines, this is a subtle call for regime change from a foreign government. How fun. Regardless, students...
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Another government said that they don't like the government in power somewhere? Oh my goodness! Tomorrow we're going to overthrow Orban! It's going to happen! We're going to start a coup in Hungary because Orban bad!
Overwhelmingly focused on demanded on paper Western-style democracy, government accountability, civil liberties like freedom of the press and speech, largely inspired by who? In reality, their interests were different and their demands were different. These weren't representatives of the collective will of China, but instead a layer of the intelligentsia who wanted to be elevated and given more privileges, such as more political power and higher wages.
That's what I said, literally.
When workers organized along...
He literally had to present his entire theory and be like, here's one letter that this people that said, I see this as souring of relations between the U.S. The U.S. covered this up for them. Like, what are we fucking smoking? Half the reason why there's so little evidence that can manifest today is because the United States helped.
Yeah.
You think the United States still doesn't? How many years were people talking about Uyghur camps before they became the mainstream thing, just before COVID hit?
Exactly.
Okay? The movement was like strong for at least 4 years. And even the year before it was actually voted on is really picked up steam because China's campaign picked up steam. France tried to send observers there.
Really?
Yeah.
Crazy.
And that's when China contacted Pakistan about maybe transferring some prisoners before France came.
Fucking hell.
That's in a leaked cable.
Yeah.
There's also reference to bioweapons in that leaked cable. That they're gonna test bioweapons in Pakistan.
So
basically, is in this cable.
So this is very out of topic, but you know how Australia banned vapes?
Yep.
So I was just looking at a dry herb vape, right?
But not cigarettes?
Yeah, so this is what I'm getting at, right? So they've banned vapes, but not cigarettes. So now you can't even buy the mods. You can't buy the juice for the mods that helps people stop smoking. Because you can get the dry herb vaporizers from vape shops. I just looked up all the vape shops that I usually look at. All of their websites are down because they had to shut down because of the vape ban. So because the Australian government is so shit at doing their fucking job of regulation, they have killed an entire sector and killed the anti-smoking efforts outside of like Nicorette. Don't we love Australia and how pro-corporate they are? Fuck yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool. We love this. We love having shit banned and promote cigarettes, even though cigarettes are like $100 for a pack now, and it's much cheaper and less invasive. And cigarettes fucking stink, and vapes don't really stink that much. You really don't notice, and it's really not that big of a deal. But the Australian government's got to get their fucking cut. Because, you know, how government's meant to work, it's a protection racket, apparently. You know, they've been raiding small businesses for vapes. Don't we love cops doing real police work?
Well, I was just talking about this with New York, but so about the bioweapons thing, I was trying to find like reference to this cable, okay? So I'm gonna say that it could have been something just about like lab testing, and it's like a level 2 lab or something, and like psychos in India elevated that to developing bioweapons. But there is funny stuff going on when France is inquiring about coming to China to check if there's a genocide happening. Basically that they were doing biological tests on these prisoners. And they were going to basically do a partnership with Pakistan with this.
What the fuck?
Bioweapon type or biological testing.
Educational class differences continually hampered their relations. These students were not, after all, Lao Baijing, meaning common people. They exhibited awareness about the articulation of economic demands by other groups and wanted to keep the movement exclusively under their control. They would go on to cordon off their marches from those who weren't students or so-called intellectuals afterwards. What started as a small gathering grew into a larger protest, with up to 1 million people joining in, though that was only at the very height. Towards the end of the protests, it would have been less than 1/10 of that. Students set up makeshift camps, organized speeches, and created posters and...
Less than 1/10? You mean 100,000 people? 100,000 people still at the end. It's a lot of people, dude.
More than Navalny ever got.
It's a lot of fucking people.
Banners displaying a wide variety of...
But I guess we can just, like, you know, systematically ignore them because some people were a little bit racist. But you defend the CCP, who is entirely racist. So why should I give a fuck about what you have to say?
Crazy. It almost seems like extremists are the ones who are in political movements, and the success of a country determines on if those extremists take power or if something else comes in. For example, Bangladesh. The government is going to be fine. Nothing is going to fundamentally change. Why? Because the government put in an intermediary government.
Yes.
Right? Just like Sri Lanka.
many of which including differing flavors of Marxism.
Oh, this is the other thing, right? Perfect. The cheap sweatshop labor. This is the other thing that I love about these people who love China, love to defend China. You're also defending the capitalism that they enact. You're also defending the wealth disparity and wealth gaps that's hoarded within the CCP itself. But not only that, you're defending the worker suppressions, the wage theft, the industrial wage theft enacted by the CCP. And if you dispute this, shut up. They are a command economy. Their money is set however the fuck they want to set it. Wages are set at whatever the government says. So yes, the Chinese government does suppress worker wages to continue to attract capital investment from outside. You are supporting capitalism by supporting China. Just so you're aware. They're also a fascist ethno-state, and you like genocide, so that's kind of fits your MO. But like, there's arguments that you can make against that statement that China is a fascist, ultra-nationalist ethno-state. But I'll fucking argue to the death that it is.
So here's the another thing, right? So this type of repression of protesters to the point of like massacres is stupid, because like I just said with Bangladesh, that was only 100 and it achieved government change, right?
Yes.
So there's outlying cases like Ukraine, right, which is the first successful revolution in how long? Like we can say maybe we can frame some of the Balkan conflicts as revolutions.
Maybe 79 really is like the last revolution.
Like that was a true revolution that changed like global society, just like how that's like as important to global society as like the French and American Revolution, and the Bolshevik one too.
And collapse of the Soviet Union as well.
Yeah, which wasn't a revolution. It was
not a revolution traditionally, but it's a collapse. But
now let's go with the so-called democracies of the world, right? The UK and the Tory party, anytime something's controversial, somebody can just resign, right? So if they wanted to appease the protesters, it would have been so easy to just resign and put another guy in, right?
Yeah.
So why can the person in China not think rationally to do something like that, right? Like Iran even allowed people to like vote out the president who was responsible for the protest. Even they do it, right?
Yeah.
So like literally, like it would get China 10 points on the democracy index. You know what I'm saying? Like, why not? Why not appease them and do the cycle of authority? Why is China so uncomfortable with doing that? Like
maybe it's got something to do with the fact that they have been that imperial emperor-based society for so long. Maybe that's what it is, and like. I know this is kind of stupid, but that imperial mandate bullshit that kind of goes on in China, that's like, that's the only way a royalty can change is if natural disasters happen kind of shit.
I think the question should be asked, where are the protests in Saudi Arabia? How come we never hear those happening?
That's probably because they get gunned down before it gets publicity.
There's certain types of protests, but they're normally like a single person protesting something.
Yeah.
Like a single, and it's a woman who's in jail now, prison.
Yes.
About to be executed, and then she gets executed and nobody cares.
Nope.
So, but Saudi Arabia, it hasn't had anything like that with the change of power.
Yeah.
Like Iran at least can swap out the presidents and has done so to appease people. Assad can't do it, so Assad is just as bad as anyone in China. Like,
yeah.
How rare is it that actually doesn't happen? Like.
Exactly.
Like even Russia at one point could be like, we changed the president, and Putin was still the president, but that was more of like, term limit law that he just made up anyway. What was the country we were just talking about where it was like Italy or Spain where they invented the law of like having a term? Oh, it was Maduro, I think, right? He changed the law to have the term. It was going to be his last term, and he changed the term limits, and only one of those things happened.
No, it was Africa. It was somewhere in Africa. It was an African country.
Okay.
And he went for another election and got a third term, right?
Oh, yeah. So it was.
Yeah, it was Africa. He changed it so the terms were longer and then ran for a third term anyway.
Was it South Africa?
I don't think so. It was definitely Africa. It was
We
North
have
Africa,
we have the scripts still. So
one of them.
Interesting that student encampments in the US aren't very popular politically. That can't possibly be hypocrisy. Anyways, despite the festive atmosphere, there was an underlying tension, and on April 19th, a number of protesters attempted to storm.
My dude. Police didn't shoot protesters protesting in favor of BDS. It was police violence.
Yeah.
But they did not murder anybody. These are false equivalencies. This is a fallacy. Stop this.
Zhongnanhai, the headquarters of the party. This, along with certain very clear calls for the overthrow of the government by liberal student leaders, got the government's attention, unsurprisingly. Many more developments, including a struggle within the party itself, increased the seriousness of the movement.
Like, he could just compare it to Bangladesh, but
take a moment to go over the...
Yeah, but no, he's not that educated enough to do it. He's not that informed enough to do it. That's the problem. Or he's actively ignorant.
Specifics, so refer to the articles at the beginning of the video if you're interested.
But he's got a
Regardless,
PhD.
martial law was declared over the area, but troops failed to arrive in Tiananmen Square in the middle of
So
May
does
because of
Reagan.
roadblocks the students had set up around the city, and since the troops had orders to avoid violent confrontations, particularly with the students, it was difficult to enter the city as planned. Despite these martial law regulations, though, the Chinese media allowed Western press to continue to make use of its transmission facilities. So much for a dictatorship, I guess. On May 27th, the Federation of College Students decided to represent their movement with a symbol, which was a plastic...
China was more open at the time, you fucking moron. There has been an exodus of foreigners inside China, so much so that they are now using Russians and like Eastern Europeans as white monkeys.
Like,
because they've run out of Americans.
The question
and
is, what was
people.
actually the conversation in the United States at this point?
Exactly.
Like, did the United States tell them, like, hey, make sure they have their, give them the right to protest, like, because the United States sure covered it up real quick. So it's not like the United States was in there being like, gun them down. Did the United States input matter at this point to the Chinese government? Or did the Chinese government not even care what the United States said? Did Clinton say, hey, people have the right to protest? Did Clinton appeal to him? And I'm not talking about openly. I'm talking about the red telephone shit, It's the commie phone. That's how you know they're talking to commies, if they got the red phone.
Any more information about where their ideological underpinnings lie. All this will become clear very soon. CIA cables gloated about how they wish this would anger the Chinese leadership, and in vague terms may have even ordered
Why? I don't understand. Yeah, the Statue of Liberty is like a... The Statue of Liberty is literally a representation of American freedom. Of course they're going to use a mock-up of a fucking Statue of Liberty. What are you talking about? This is leading to the US paid for it.
How about some more proof?
No, but the CIA source, right?
This is not proof, by the way.
Where's that source? Can I get a source? Did he link it? Did he put all his sources in the description for that CIA source? It should be a CIA fucking cable. Where are your sources?
Zero sources.
Not saying here are where my sources are. Most people will do that, right? This is where I grab my sources from.
Zero sources.
Okay.
No sources.
So like, can we go up? I'll find it. What is he claiming the CIA said? I'm good at finding CIA documents, so.
Particularly with students, use of it to represent
like I found
plaster reconstruction of.
I'm trying to fucking listen.
Well, just pause for a second. Jesus Christ, bro! Like I found the fucking external link for sources. He does have it there, right?
No.
And anyway, like with Pega, she brought up in our interview with her, she brought up these the things about America. Like she believes that America helped the Shah rise to power, and I literally was able to find CIA documents backing up her beliefs. It doesn't like necessarily show that like they're totally responsible, but it does show the US totally like allowed it to happen, like they could have intervened and prevented it, but it's really not their place anyway. And they didn't necessarily see as the overthrow being something that would disinterest their power. But they were actively talking about how the Ayatollah should not come to power. But they believed that he would only be, because the Shia aren't supposed to have political representation. That's why Sadr doesn't, right? So they thought that the Ayatollah was going to put in someone else as his like emissary and puppet, and that was the person that they were going to be able to deal with. But none of that says that, hey, it's a good idea. It just says, hey, a revolution is totally going to happen, and maybe we can get this guy to work with us. Did you find externals?
Yeah, all of the links are broken.
Okay.
Except for the New York Times.
Well, we can go up. I'll get the source. Now we can hit play, and I'll find out.
I'm literally telling you the links that he has are broken links.
I'll find it through Google. Just scroll up and start playing again.
The Statue of Liberty in Tiananmen Square, as if you needed any more information about where their ideological underpinnings lie. All this will become clear very soon.
Where's the American flag?
Gloated about how they wish this would anger the Chinese leadership, and
okay,
vague terms may have even ordered it. How about some more proof?
Oh my god.
Liu Xiaobo, a major protest leader who just 1 year prior called for the outright overthrow of the Chinese government, the institution of complete market reforms, and the replacement of Chinese culture with modern culture, read Western culture, that's what he meant, would arrive back in China from New York just in time for the protests, and would now call for armed struggle against the Chinese government.
I just want to kind of prove my point here. Here, so for example, no article. This one, no article. Counterpunch again, no article. So that's kind of cool. And these are all for what he's currently saying right now. All of these articles are broken links. So that's pretty cool.
Okay. So, okay.
Yeah, that too. What the fuck?
I got the cable source. Okay. So, State Department memorandum singly concerns about South Korea's nuclear weapons program argued that China and even the Soviet Union may be tempted to support the North Koreans with nuclear weapons in event of a conflict between the two Koreas. This doesn't sound like China at all. Weird. So it's talking about a nuclear conflict between Korea here, not anything to do with Tiananmen Square. So they said that both China and Soviet Union may be tempted to support the North Koreans with nuclear weapons in event of a conflict between the two Koreas. Source, U.S. Department State Cable, ROK, plans to develop nuclear weapons and missiles. March 1975 History and Public Policy Program, Digital Archive, Gerald Ford Presidential Library, National Security Advisor, Presidential County Files for East Asia and the Pacific, Box 11, Korea State Department Telegrams to Secretary of State, NODIS. Obtained by Charles Carrars or something. So yeah, not about Tiananmen Square. It's literally talking about how they're worried about a nuclear exchange if China gets too tight with Korea here. I don't see anything about a Statue of Liberty.
Years of colonialism to transform China. In 100 years of colonialism, Hong Kong has changed to what we see today. With China being so big, of course, it would require 300 years as a colony for it to be able to transform into how Hong Kong is today. I have my doubts as to whether 300 years would be enough. Yikes. Since the beginning of June, following 2 months of on and off.
Again, not proof. Also, the fact that the links are broken and your sourcing is now irrelevant is why you do a little thing called journalism and corroborate your sources, you fool. Instead of Captain PhD using a single source, which then gets redacted or taken down and is now unsourceable, and you now look like an idiot. Good job.
Troops slowly made their way into Beijing. A number of these troops moved towards Tiananmen Square.
Tiananmen Square
troops continued their negotiations
so
and almost reached an agreement with the students that would have ended.
I found something here that's wow. President Zelensky. Okay.
I'm so fucking hungry. I'm gonna go put food on.
I found like a Tiananmen Square thing, but
cool. I'm just gonna play. I'll be back. Yeah.
The protests. But this was sabotaged by the more radical, violent elements of those same liberal protest leaders looking for a fight, not a solution. On the morning of June 3rd, more attacks were made on military vehicles. Reporters for Time magazine stated, by 7 a.m., though, students and young workers outside Zhongnam High were smashing their way into 2 military buses filled with light machine guns and crates of ammunition. As for isolated pockets of troops hemmed in at the intersections and overpasses around the city, the crowd was not in a mood to merely lecture them. In some places, the troops were stripped almost naked, chased or struck by angry citizens. Other injured troops had difficulty getting to hospitals as mobs deflated or slashed the tires of military ambulances. This isn't the least of it. I'm not going to show any of the footage, but the violence reached such a point that unarmed soldiers were burned alive. Some calculations have up to half the dead being PLA soldiers trapped in their armored personnel carriers, buses, and tanks as the vehicles were torched. Others were killed and brutally mutilated by protesters with various implements. These events that actually happened are instead overshadowed by mythical tanks running over people in tents, which never happened. Only after this did the government respond with violence in turn. The decision was made to bring in the troops which remained outside Beijing. At 6:30 on the night of June 3rd, the announcement was made around Beijing that people should remain in their neighborhoods and stay away from Tiananmen Square. Around midnight, soldiers stationed about 3 miles west of the square are said to have started firing indiscriminately at unarmed civilians in the streets. Chang'an Boulevard in particular became the scene of intense and brutal confrontations. People staying at the Beijing Hotel, close to the square, reported seeing troops open fire on unarmed citizens who were too far away to pose any real threat. This is, however, countered by other Western reporting and comments from protesters that said no indiscriminate firing ever occurred. Estimates suggest that between 200 and 300 people...
No indiscriminate firing ever occurred! What does that mean exactly?
Tried to push through the barricades and crowds. As for the square itself, a Taiwan-born singer and composer, Hou Dejian, who joined the student protesters at the square and negotiated with the Chinese army commissar, said, "During the whole withdrawal process, I didn't see a single student, other citizens, or soldiers killed in the square, nor did I see any armored troop carriers rolling over people." Richard Ross from CBS News reported being held by Chinese troops while driving through the square and didn't see any bodies or signs of a massacre. Additionally, James Miles, BBC's Beijing correspondent, said, "There was violence in Beijing, but no massacre in the square itself." Accounts from diplomats are very similar. A Chilean diplomat inside the square noted that while there were sporadic gunshots, most troops had non-lethal gear like batons and clubs. This particular diplomat's account supports the view that there was no mass shooting in the square itself. Even U.S. embassy cables, later released, or unwillingly released by WikiLeaks, confirmed that the worst violence happened outside the square, especially at Mushidi, 3 miles west. These accounts from a diverse set of people and motivations challenges this widely held belief that there was a massacre within Tiananmen Square. Chinese government always claimed no one was killed in the square, but they don't
it was
deny
going to
the
be
serious violence
actually
and
they
deaths that
weren't
occurred in
killed
the
inside the
surrounding
square,
areas.
but it did
These reports from
happen.
Western diplomats and journalists back that up. The Chinese government's account of the events was initially dismissed as propaganda, of course, but turned out to be more or less correct. They reported about 300 deaths, which is true, including many soldiers of the PLA. In contrast, Western sources seemed to decide at random what the death toll was. They claimed and still claim that thousands had died, ranging from 2,600 to as high as 10,000 people. Nicholas Kristof from the New York Times suggested, basically by guessing, that about a dozen soldiers and policemen were killed, along with 400 to 800 civilians. On the 12th of June, 1989, the New York Times published an exhaustive but entirely fabricated eyewitness report describing brutal mass killings in the square. Eyewitness accounts and later investigations, though, revealed that the Chinese government's claims were basically correct. These inflated numbers and presentation were part of a concerted effort by Western media to craft a very particular narrative, the typical brutal authoritarian regime committing horrific crimes against humanity because the leadership of a particular country isn't a US puppet, and Western capital can't exploit local labor to the fullest while also stripping the
What are
country
you
of all its natural
talking
resources
about?
for cheap.
This is when
Israel
we
never
could
gets this
say
kind
they're
of
a
coverage in
puppet
the
of the
American press.
US.
Why is that, I wonder? And if the West just making stuff up
Now
about
we're
the incident
bringing
wasn't enough to
Manifest
completely
Destiny
discredit the
into
grand
it?
myth they built, actually existing evidence.
Were you yelling?
Yes.
Go on.
He
Oh,
was
you
saying
done?
that the U.S. reported on it, saying that there were. So, first of all, you missed everything.
Oh, really?
Once again, you missed everything.
Hilarious.
He said that massacres didn't happen inside the square; they happened outside it, and the U.S. reporting was bad at the time.
Beautiful.
And that they were crafting a narrative because they didn't like that China wasn't a puppet of the U.S. And I said, what are you saying? At this point, they could have been described as one, right? And then he showed a picture of Manifest Destiny and said, I wonder why.
Hysterical. Oh my god. They really do just repeat the same talking points.
Where's the CIA cable that said their goal was to anger the government?
Yeah. Wait, is it really the oldest is 10 years? That's pathetic. Like, and this is why I didn't release the article
technically,
on
no,
Gulf
he
War
did
syndrome.
reference that the wiki source.
Okay.
The WikiLeaks source that literally tells us that everything that was correctly sourced and reported at the time did happen. Like the wiki source that they used to try to debunk the square, like Wumaos do it all the time, thinking that because they know people won't read as long as they know they haven't read it. So as long as they point to the source like they're told and people don't read, they just continue assuming that this WikiLeaks source is like a great thing, but he did it correctly. He even cited that WikiLeaks source it says that there was no violence inside the square; it was outside the square. So that was correct, and exactly what I said was going to happen when I saw that wiki source was in the video.
And I also said that he would say that the US funded it, basically, and he did.
Because they're not puppets.
Yep, love it, great.
When there's an American flag at protest, it means American-backed coup.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that America is literally.
Did you notice what flags those people had in those with that picture of the Statue of Liberty?
No,
did you notice?
No.
I think I saw specific countries' flags in that protest crowd. that might be relevant to that document I was talking about angering the U.S. government or angering the Chinese government. But I'm not sure because it's my monitor, so I would actually need to see the picture up close. So I'm going to type in Tiananmen
Yeah, you find the
Square.
picture. I'm not going to go back.
In the form of aerial
Tiananmen
photos
Square.
of the conflict zone showed over 100 military trucks and armored vehicles torched, lynched PLA soldiers, and, most shockingly of all, demonstrators actually stripping the automatic rifles off of soldiers who put up no fight.
Good.
Yeah, I've heard this narrative before as well. Is but they attacked the soldiers. I don't care. I don't care. They're protesting. Fuck you. Every time the police or military show up, they're the ones that instigate the conflict. The protests are almost never violent until they show up.
Okay, I thought I saw Korean flags, but it's looking at it on further inspection, it's not a Korean flag. I don't know what kind of flag it is, but a lot of these flags are different in the square at the time.
Send the link.
Well, I'm just clicking on different pictures, that's all.
Okay.
And it's not exactly clear in the pictures. I can't find one that it shows.
Okay.
I think this was the one that he showed right here, though. Right? This one.
Yeah.
And I saw this one in the background, and I thought, hey, is that the Korean
one looks
flag?
like a Japanese flag.
But see in the background the white and red, and with the red in the center.
Yeah, that looks like the Japanese.
So I was like, is that a Korean flag? But see, they're all different. They're all like
No, they look like Chinese. They might be Chinese, like workers' flags, representation flags, kind of like union banners.
Yeah, and then I
almost.
assume this is Mongolian because it's got tricolors on it.
Maybe. Not sure.
But look, they put up scaffolding to like do this entire thing. Pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
And I didn't know that they did this, so thanks, Hakeem.
All right. Ugh.
Yes, seriously. Tells a wildly different story insofar as telling the truth about the incident is concerned. But do you see just how far from the truth the Western telling of the story is? Well, if you've been keeping up with the news at all, none of this should be any surprise to you. This is an important note. Many of those killed by the army were...
My history teacher, who I credit as being the best history teacher I had, because when he taught about communism, he just started yelling, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Which is like an incorrect analysis. But he said that the tanks rolled over the people on the way to the square to me. So maybe it was just my bourgeois education in my fucking city school that was, racially mixed and had a black quota, I think. He also said that he wished life was like High School Musical and people broke out into song at school.
Yeah.
He was a very good teacher. Loved his job.
Well, if you've been keeping up with the news at all, none of this should be any surprise to you. This is
also did a really good lecture on like I've said this before, but there's a special. It's a half day, and it's like a field trip day.
Okay.
And what it is it's a fucking lesson on the Holocaust.
Oh boy.
So it's a half day where it's just talking about the Holocaust. No other courses.
I mean that's what it should be.
And you watch the trials of Nuremberg first. So they show you how the Nazis were punished first, and then you watch Schindler's List. And it's a whole analysis of the movies.
I've never seen Schindler's List. Is that bad?
No.
Good.
Hey, there's a Tiananmen Square memorial exhibit in New York City.
Huh. Interesting.
I wonder if it's still up. You'll never guess what source I used to figure out this. Because I was trying to see what flags.
CIA? Yeah.
No, even worse. The American-backed media at PBS.
Awesome.
So I saw some of the flags there, so I wanted to see if there's other flags at the exhibit, but I don't know. Can't see.
Okay. My food done. I'll be back.
Of Beijing and on the way to the square, not in it. This may sound like a distinction without a difference, but it's not. Tiananmen Square is enclosed enough that the image conveyed by claiming there was a massacre in the square is one of shooting fish in a barrel, which is to say that it implies the soldiers were just blindly shooting into a restricted mass of people, which is horrific, but isn't what happened. Now, the Tiananmen Square massacre has become a massive Mandela effect moment, a collective false memory, pushed by Western media despite numerous reports and eyewitness accounts to the contrary. So what really happened that day? Well, for starters, this protest was not as spontaneous as it appeared. In the days leading up to the confrontation, the US government was actively involved in promoting the pro-democracy protests through a well-funded, internationally coordinated propaganda machine, much of which came from Voice of America. The protests were also not one ideological trend, but representative of a broad spectrum from working-class Maoists upset with Deng's reforms to liberal urban elites hoping that political reform would bring with it asset speculation and Western-like managerial salaries, and to hell with democracy if it suited them. Guess which section the Western press focused on? Where Kai-shi, a leader of the protest, said it in even plainer terms. So, what do we want? Nike shoes, lots of free time to take our girlfriends to the bar, the freedom to discuss an issue with someone and get a little respect from society. Lofty ideals, clearly. When soldiers who were not given any orders upon arriving on the scene entered the square on June 4th, 1989, they didn't swarm in, guns blazing. No, instead, a small group of soldiers showed up, unarmed, and spoke with student leaders.
You gotta rewind a little to hear this quote he gives to justify the protest
speculation and Western-like managerial salaries.
Keep going.
And to hell with democracy if it's
little more
confrontation, a false memory, pushed by Western media despite numerous reports and eyewitness accounts to the contrary. So what really happened that day? Well, for starters, this protest was not as spontaneous as it appeared. In the days leading up to the confrontation, the US government was actively involved in promoting the pro-democracy protests through a well-funded, internationally coordinated propaganda machine, much of which came from Voice of America. The protests were also not one ideological trend, but representative of a broad spectrum from working-class Maoists upset with Deng's reforms to liberal urban elites hoping that political reform would bring with it asset speculation and Western-like managerial salaries, and to hell with democracy if it suited them. Guess which section the Western press focused on? Where Kai-shi, a leader of the protest, said it in even plainer terms. So, what do we want? Nike shoes, lots of...
You mean to tell me the Western media that the Chinese government allowed there focused on democratic ideals and freedom? Not the Western media that was allowed there. That totally proves there's a conspiracy, and not that it was a free press that the Americans were using that is like obviously soft power because they just basically give people journalistic freedom in these countries.
Yeah.
Like, that's not how Voice of America works. That's not how the soft power with Voice of America works. They don't sit here. They're not a fucking psyop, bro. Like, it's a way different form of soft power. It's not like I'm not acknowledging that it's an imperialist tool.
Yeah, like, we're fully aware the VOA is a tool of the US government, but every VOA video that we've watched, local journalists doing a local story. Every single fucking one.
Well, this was VOA in the past.
I bet you it hasn't changed.
But like VOA, like one of the main reasons it was started was because of Berlin, right?
Yeah.
So they would broadcast into Berlin. Same with Radio Free Europe. Like, these were propaganda outlets that were there. And how did they promote the freedom? By just doing free press stories.
Yep.
Right? So if your regime is so fragile that it can't handle free press, go fuck yourself. Okay?
Yep.
Go fuck yourself. Like, how are you that fragile? Like, there's other countries that have way more like journalism allowed in their countries that aren't like approved and produced by that government. One of those countries used to be Russia.
The free time to take our
Gorbachev, bro.
Freedom to discuss an issue with someone and get a little respect from society.
Amazing. Gorbachev brought in free press, and then suddenly the Soviet Union fell. I'm sure they had something to do with each other. It was actually a VOA conspiracy to fall the Soviet Union. It had everything to do with him bringing in the free press there, just like how the mistake was allowing these foreign journalists in the country.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
That was the mistake. Yeah.
And guess who else, VOA reported on Euromaidan. Coincidence?
Crazy. Oh my God. Were they also in Georgia? Did they report on Georgia as well?
Maybe.
I bet you they did.
Showed up, unarmed, and spoke with student leaders. More troops arrived, and negotiations were eventually interrupted by violence called for from liberal radicals in the crowd, who would go on Western interviews calling for bloodshed because it was supposedly the only thing that...
So let's just say VOA is behind the revolution, right? Why would the people in that country be so interested in VOA that it would completely change their worldview away from this perfect Denganist system? that apparently is bad for communism because it was meeting Western interests. Why would they be so interested in these foreign outlets to inspire a revolution, huh?
Makes you think.
Would bring change. So again, while most people were there,
China's just a widow goblin. It doesn't even drop good loot.
The video had ulterior motives. She admitted in an interview that the goal was to provoke the government into a violent crackdown with the hope that it would topple the Communist Party. All this similar to the desires of the U.S. I couldn't possibly understand why.
You mean to tell me a protest leader's goal was to topple the government?
Crazy.
It's too important, and that she should leave the square should any violence happen. How quaint. She's also on tape talking racist nonsense about how the Chinese aren't worth the effort. Additionally, reports from the time describe how these liberal anti-government fighters were highly organized and grouped themselves into formations of 100 to 150 people around the square.
I have no idea.
They armed themselves with Molotov cocktails and iron clubs to use against the still unarmed PLA. Once the confrontations escalated, the deaths began, starting with dozens of soldiers and later protesters. One of the most interesting bits, a fanciful documentary titled The Gate of Heavenly Peace, was made in the 90s, of course funded by the US.
So, I mean, did the cops not? Were the cops just standing there, or were they using anti-riot tactics on protesters?
If the PLA wasn't there,
were they in a phalanx, moving towards people and hitting them?
I think that's actually what happened.
Oh no! People threw rocks at police in phalanx. You know, like what? Like have we seen a Latin American protest in the last century? You know, or the last decade? You know, we've seen what like police are in legitimate danger when they show up to quell protests this big. People respond to state violence with violence. Yes. Yep. Okay. So to draw this into a who shot first thing, no. Right? Because that's what they do with Euromaidan too. They say because there's like evidence that there was a counter sniper in the Press Hotel. Right, strong evidence. Even like seen that there was a sniper by Western journalists at ABC. They pointed to the hotel and said that they saw someone with a rifle in the hotel.
Really?
Right? And so ballistic forensics, which I helped with, potentially shows that there was direction of fire that hit protesters coming from that Press Hotel, and that it was So like they're like if these because you can only get like it's not perfect. Lasers aren't perfect, right? So like the trajectory that could have potentially came from this hotel could have potentially even been a Russian agent that's in the hotel.
Yeah.
Inside because you can just like bring a fucking rifle in a tripod bag.
Yeah.
Right? So then one of the mainstream things where the first step to the Euromaidan conspiracy that you'll see proposed by Gray Zone is that the shots that first happened that day happened before like everyone's up. They happened like just when the sun's coming up at like 5 and 6 a.m. Right? So like people weren't out filming yet, right? So people woke up to people already being shot and killed by the police, right? So the police have already, if the shot came from the protesters first and this double agent who fired at both sides at 6 a.m., if that is true, and that did happen at 6 a.m., guess what? Then it's a Russian agent.
Yeah.
But they try to argue this wasn't a Russian agent. It was like this Western-backed certain thing. And then investigations were actually opened, partially by New York Times.
Yeah.
To investigate like what happened inside this hotel. Wonder who shut those down. Could it have been Russia? Weird, right? So like we don't know for sure if this happened, but if it did, it almost certainly was a Russian agent there.
Government, Ford, and the Rockefeller Foundation.
Also, people try to act like we cover up there was counter snipers. And it was just the police killing people.
Okay.
Right. And so you'll see this if you type in like Euromaidan proof that the protesters shot themselves. Like you'll find footage that looks like the direction of fire is coming up from like above the people.
Interesting.
But also these people are shooting guns without fucking optics. The counter snipers. So if shots did come from counter snipers that hit protesters who were engaging at a police line. And also, they were told the counter snipers, allegedly, counter snipers were allegedly told by somebody who might be Georgian that they were to shoot above the cops to keep their heads down, that they weren't trying to engage police.
Interesting.
That's what they claim.
Interesting.
Which I think is fucking bullshit.
Sounds like horseshit, yeah. Sounds like some cope.
Right? So, like, there's a lot of things even in question with Euromaidan that we don't necessarily know for sure. But guess what? Police killed 100 protesters that day, and it ended with people using tire fires and bricks from the Freedom Square to overthrow a fucking government. Like, why do the details matter? Like, if it, oh my god, a U.S. agent started it, and then police killed 100 people. Who the fuck cares who started it?
The police killed 100 people.
The police killed 100 people.
I don't know why this is so hard to understand. Like, there is no way that you can argue this, which makes the police the good guys.
But within the interviews, which they're trying to use to support
from Crimea, who were told that these were all Nazis.
A series of events, the protest leaders admit to, amongst other things, 1, foreign funding and support, 2, the desire to overthrow the government, 3, political suppression of liberals by other liberals within the protests themselves, so much for democracy, 4, them admitting to lying about bloodshed on the square, and specifically the tanks rolling over people part, 5,
China,
weird racism
China
about
would
Chinese people not being ready
never, fund the first revolutionary group in, say, like a country like Afghanistan that totally spun out of control and started a war that's lasted for almost like 50 years. China wouldn't do that, right?
No, never. Why would they do that? That's silly.
Democracy, not having the brain for it, and other cringe. And finally, 6, wanting to instigate as much state violence as possible from...
Also, nobody says anything about tanks rolling over people. I don't know where this narrative came from.
Well, I was told that in school. I will say that they gave the order that if the people are in the way, that they should be run over, and the tanks didn't stop.
Weird. I've never heard that.
From the get-go. By the way, remember Kai-Shi from earlier?
Well,
he's a proven liar as well.
That's what I'm saying. I don't necessarily know if I was told that tanks ran over people. I just know that he summarized it as the Chinese government saying they sent the tanks in and said, crush them if they're in the way.
Yeah, okay.
You know who did use tanks to run over people?
Stalin?
The Taliban. They ran over a pedophile's legs and then hung him from the tank.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, hard to say if he was specifically a pedophile. He had underage girls. Which, it might have just been any girl who was weak that he would take.
Sounds predatory.
Yeah. He was like a fucking, like he committed a crime of pedophilia. But that's the thing, is the difference between the disorder and the crime. The whole like map who say that they're non-offenders type stuff.
We don't use those words.
Yeah. I'm just saying those types of people. Most people don't even admit it or try to join a support group who...
Pedos are pedos.
But like somebody was saying they're trying to sell this like a new sexual orientation. I'm like, this, first of all, no, they're not. That's not what this
They did try and get included in the fucking in the thing for a little bit there. They did try and get their little P in the acronym, but
nobody
justifiably,
nobody
there's no
was
fucking
actually
way
trying to argue that. I believe that most of those people are just trolled.
You reckon?
Yes. Like, why would you go online and be like, look for a community of pedophiles? That's kind of going to bring some attention to you, don't you think?
Yeah, probably.
So anyway, we had a criminal justice person come in. She literally works at the sex crime prison. Right? It's her job to reform these people. And she was saying, like, talking about the difference between the crime and what the condition is, right? And how that these people literally can't help their attraction. They have to basically live celibate lives. Like, her counseling is to like get them to be able to live a life where they're not, like, these people don't get fixed coming out of there where they're suddenly not attracted to children.
I know.
That's not how it works. So then it's like, as long as they don't offend, are they okay to exist in society? It doesn't matter what you think because they're never going to tell you who they are unless they're like on
Yes.
the list,
Yeah. I have a solution for them. Fix it real quick.
A lot of them do kill themselves. A lot of them. Because they can't live anymore and they don't want to actually hurt anyone, so they kill themselves.
Yeah, I mean I guess that's kind of sad, but at the same time, pedophile.
Because like most of the people who do the crime are like not necessarily attracted to children. It's more of a crime
like rape,
or they were abused when they were kids, and it's acting out a response to that.
Yes.
So like it's actually the criminals that are more likely to not actually
dangerous.
be psychological pedophiles, the ones that can actually be reformed.
Interesting.
Put back into
It's
society.
a very interesting discussion. It's also very taboo. I don't want to have that discussion.
I'm just saying.
Get the fuck out of here.
Somebody who works with them made this distinction, but guess what? It doesn't matter what the distinction is.
Yes. Yeah.
Like the crime is a crime, regardless of if we acknowledge that people are just born that way, and it's sad and tragic that they are.
And it's not even a crime in like the legal sense. It's more of a societal crime. Like, you you do that to a kid, you probably deserve to be
like murder is more acceptable to society.
Yeah. It's honestly, I would almost say that rape should also be there above murder, but it's not for some reason. I don't.
The issue is that when you start talking about, and we're talking about the psychology end, this is like like nobody should need to know about this or care about this except for people who are like in the field of psychology.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like none of this actually matters to real society.
Mm-hmm.
It matters to specific psychologists working with these people to reform them. So it really doesn't matter. But the thing is, the idea of pushing it as like an actual orientation, like that just makes it easier for trolls to project trans and gay people as groomers.
Yes, exactly. And that's probably what it was.
I'm sure there is plenty of people who do go online and have tried to have these communities and might have a community.
Yeah.
But like there's also a controversial thing of like, speaking of which, I sent you a video of Dave Cat we should watch after this to cleanse our palates.
I've got plenty of palate cleansers.
I think I want to look at Dave Cat so you always remember, because you'll never forget Dave Cat once we look at him.
No.
Yep. I'll play it.
Fine. I am not playing it.
So
events he described allegedly.
Let's finish this fucking nightmare of a video.
All verified eyewitness
or we can just skip the rest, because I think we've seen enough.
I want to watch more.
Okay, because we've also got hypocrisy continued.
Students who had remained in the square when troops arrived to clear them had all been allowed to leave the square peacefully. About foreign support. The movement received both financial and moral support from various international sources, particularly the United States. Newspapers and organizations in the US, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and the UK were publishing false reports and providing outside financial support to the movement. Now, this wouldn't be a proper US-backed attempted coup or revolution if we didn't talk about the Voice of America.
Got the words as well.
Pumping out propaganda at an incredible speed, increasing its Chinese language broadcasts to 11 hours daily, with the specific goal of creating confusion and panic not just among Chinese citizens, but soldiers as well. Sensational reporting and claims were pushed, such as soldiers were firing on other soldiers and that key government figures had been killed. This was designed to portray the Chinese government as chaotic and violent and to spur further instability.
Where are the articles?
Western journalists, ever so honest, made sure to portray the students as noble and idealistic, focusing on acts of generosity by people in Hong Kong and elsewhere who sent material support to the students, but made no mention of American propaganda.
What?
The Voice of America. They were pro-student and democracy.
Crazy.
No way. It almost seems like all their reporting is like that.
The channels working overtime on the students. There's also some anecdotal evidence of the CIA providing material and support to the protesters, and a similar pattern to the support they gave Eastern European counter-revolutionary movements. But I didn't include it here because it's not as concrete.
Why wasn't there so much trust in it? Why didn't people trust the Chinese government? Why wasn't there as much Chinese government? Like, why did the Chinese government not invest in their own media empire and atmosphere? because they were too poor to match up with the imperial
What we do
power of
know is
the
that the inventor of it-
capitalist United States.
Or
Wait, what's that? They did? They helped to overthrow a regime in Afghanistan? No way. And other countries that were involved in the Soviet split.
pretty
What?
sure it was also like 10 years after a massive
Bro,
famine.
wait till you find out how many conflicts where China and Soviets were on different sides, and then sometimes the United States would be on either one.
Amazing.
For
The concept
example,
of American-backed
Afghanistan.
revolutions, Gene Sharp was at Tiananmen Square during the protests. Sharp's co-worker, Colonel Robert Helvey, had also trained in Hong Kong the student leaders from Beijing in mass demonstration techniques, which they were to subsequently use in the Tiananmen Square incident of June 1989. He would later go on to train Falun Gong in China in similar civil disobedience techniques. Following the crackdown through Operation Yellowbird, many of the student leaders escaped to the United States with the help of the CIA or other intelligence.
No
Almost all of
way!
them gained privileged positions. I wonder why. They
No
became
way!
conservative media heads, investment bankers, hedge fund managers, political appointees, or other rewards for what they had done. Imagine the inverse for a second.
Rewards.
Massive protests in the US, sponsored by the Chinese, where afterwards every major protest leader is smuggled out of China to China, living privileged and comfortable lives afterwards. Really gets the critical thinking going.
Wow,
Chris.
and you mean to
The
tell
myth
me
of
that
the
the
Tiananmen Square
people
massacre is one
who
of the
were
West's
in these
favorite-
positions were already rich to begin with?
Hmm.
And that, wow. And then they fled the country and were able to get asylum. No way. When has this happened?
Rallying cries
This totally
to defend the
justifies.
democracy, and in the words of Noam Chomsky, the uniformity
Oh, cringe.
Oh god.
This all totally justifies mass killing.
State terror.
Not the best source.
Cool.
and obedience of the media, which any dictator would admire, push it dutifully. A few years earlier, in the spring of
They
1980, the US-backed
manufactured
military
consent.
dictatorship of the Republic of Korea put down the Gwonju democratization movement, with an estimated dead of up to 2,000 people. In the beginning
Yeah.
of 1989, just months before Tiananmen Square, the US-backed right-wing Venezuelan government of Carlos Andres Perez squashed protests that lasted 9 days, where up to 1,000 people were slaughtered by the Venezuelan military.
Guess what, Hakeem? Also bad.
Yeah, but it's not talked
To
about
quote the
like
Red Sox
Tiananmen
article.
Square is.
Probably because it's not covered up like Tiananmen Square is. I imagine if you actually look into it, there's probably a lot of information on those things.
Yeah.
And not a lot of counter Wu Mao fucking propagandists doing their little white monkey bullshit. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's the Streisand effect.
So far, they did happen. The murders did happen, not inside the square, and the students were Western agents and deserved it.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Up to date.
Cool.
Article I recommend you read. It should strike us as strange that these comparable incidents are not taught to anyone in the West, let alone commemorated in a yearly fashion. Could it possibly be because they don't actually care about freedom and democracy? Yes, it's absolutely that.
Commemorated in
Tiananmen Square event-
hang on. A small group of people who might be like, refugees might commemorate something, and that's evidence of something. Like, I'm sure there's commemoration of a lot of insignificant events that only like that can be. Look at the Baloch. Nobody gives a fuck about them. You think they don't commemorate events?
Hakeem, hi. There are almost 6 million Chinese diaspora inside of the United States. I imagine many of those ran from the CCP for reasons.
Well, even before that, there was a little something called the Chinese Exclusion Act because too many were coming over. It's considered one of the worst policies in American history.
Yeah. So it's almost like there's a lot of Chinese people in America, and the diaspora generally don't like the tyrannical governments. Look at Persians. I wonder why this would be celebrated and signposted as a bad thing that the Chinese government has done and that nobody should forget that they did. Maybe that's why. But what do I know?
How come nobody talks about the Japanese internment camps that the United States did?
And is propagandized to this level is because China is a geopolitical enemy of the US,
Sure
not by
it is.
choice, but because
Did
they
you
dare
know
to
the
grow
United
their
States
economy on
did
their own merits and
slavery?
to
How come
eventually
nobody
challenge
talks
the US'
about
uniform
that?
domination
Hey,
on
did
the
you
earth.
know
For
that
the
the
listeners
United
listening, read
States
Section
used a
5 of-
union to like brutally massacre people who were just wanted higher wages? Do you know that happened? Wow. How come nobody ever talks about that? How union busting happened by corporations, and the government protected them. Hey, did you know that these corporations like made their own currency and distributed it as wages to people? So that way they could only support like the company town on the company dollar. Like these companies made their own currency inside the United States. Can you believe that?
Of the Red Sails article. Since China has been slandered so much over an incident that didn't happen, as popularly believed, and since the US is the main culprit in the creation and perpetuation of the myth.
Okay, so like I said, okay, we'll just start calling the streets leading into Tiananmen Square massacre, right? As long as we're calling it that, then it's fine, right?
That should be fine, right? So massacre in the streets leading up to Tiananmen Square. There,
yeah,
perfect. Or
I'm sure we can make it an abbreviation.
Yeah. Streets.
Wait, so you mean to tell me it's called the Tiananmen Square massacre because the protests were the Tiananmen Square protests? So it's the Tiananmen Square protest massacre. Crazy. I can't believe all these people lied with bad reporting in 50 years ago. Bad reporting happened. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Where people didn't have great sources. That certainly doesn't happen today. Like, Hurricane Katrina, where they said there was a bunch of bodies in the freezers.
Yeah.
Or like
this is the new acronym for it's the Sluts Massacre.
Yeah.
The streets leading up to Tiananmen Square massacre, the Sluts Massacre.
So what was the thing that recently happened that was a don't look in the freezer moment with bad reporting? I want to say Afghanistan, the Marine shooting, but it was something else, I believe. Oh, beheading babies in October 7th.
Yes. There, perfect.
So let's look at the October 7th massacre. How much bad reporting was done? Let's establish how much of the reporting had an agenda and how much of it was bad sourcing, right? So this is the issue in most of the time, is that it's the sourcing itself. Journalists just don't look in the freezer. So like the journalists who first perpetuated these things, they didn't have good sources. It was just guys who said, I heard that there was people who were decapitated over here.
Yeah, and I heard from a dude. Yeah. They didn't actually bother to double check.
If you look at Tim Pool's journalism on his Google Glass, it's all him saying, we heard that there was conflicts over here, but we're running away.
Or worse than the events of Tiananmen Square, that basically nobody knows about. With World War I out of the way and the Spanish flu being contained, it was time for taking out some anger on black people, a favorite American pastime. In 1921 Oklahoma, in the town of Tulsa, African Americans had built a fairly wealthy community.
Yes, famously, Tulsa is unknown here. Nobody knows Tulsa happened.
Why is he bringing up Tulsa race riots?
Nobody knows what Tulsa is. Nobody understands why Trump made that speech on Juneteenth in Tulsa was fucking significant. No, and nobody understands that, huh? Like,
took place on the night of May 3rd.
Black Wall Street, never heard of it.
31st and continued into the morning of June 1st, 1921. White residents of Tulsa launched a devastating attack on Greenwood, sparked by inflammatory coverage in the Tulsa Tribune regarding an alleged grave attempt by a young black man on a white girl that was almost certainly either an exaggeration of an innocent interaction or entirely fabricated, both of which are historically common tactics used to justify violence against black people or colonial subjects. Just look at Palestine. Regardless, the economic success of the Greenwood.
And guess what Russian and Chinese propaganda does? Same fucking thing. It's called propaganda, you fucking moron.
Yeah, and also these are like tabloid racist papers.
Yeah.
Like how did these fucking riots in Britain just happen? Was it because there was bad reporting that was intentionally done to stoke stuff?
AI 5G.
Oh no.
Community simply made them.
It was because of bad. No. There was some of manipulated images, but it was allegedly the murder of these people who was done by a British citizen. But they said that it was an immigrant, just knowing that it would spark stuff.
Yes. Yeah. And it technically is an immigrant, Welsh. Technically.
Them a convenient scapegoat. It's also true that historically, this kind of violence against black people, who some whites thought were doing too well for themselves, was common. White mobs, many wearing their World War I army uniforms, set fires throughout the Greenwood district, with the Tulsa police officers joining in on the arson of black businesses along Archer Street. The result was predictably
Racist
devastating. An
police,
estimated
no
300
way.
dead and over 4,000 black residents who were jailed and placed under armed guard in various locations. The town was put under martial law, and black people, and only black people, were required to carry identity cards known as green cards to get around. Greenwood was obliterated. Over 1,000 residences burned, another
What does
400
this have
looted,
to
and
do
countless lives
with
lost. Hey,
Tiananmen?
speaking of the U.S. police state, let's move ahead to 1980s Philadelphia with
What
a
does this
radical
have to
black
do
group
with
Move
called
Tiananmen
bombing.
Square?
the organization.
Now
founded by
this I'll
Vincent Lee
give
Park
him.
in
Nobody knows this happened.
True.
I'll give him
1972
this.
was
True. Very true.
rooted in a unique blend of black liberation and environmentalism back to nature principles. MOVE members rejected modern
There's this
technology,
one of the
instead
survivors
advocating for
right
a
there in the
lifestyle that was
middle.
in harmony with
Really?
the natural world,
Yeah.
whatever that means.
She's the
Because they
based
believe
one who
would lead to
says,
true
like, I
freedom and-
still got the scars, and people
Mm.
tell me you should get cosmetic surgery. They can, you know, take those burns off you. And she says,
She
and
doesn't
my
want to.
response is, why would I want to cover it up? I want to be reminded.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely sympathize with that, honestly. Like I get it. Like
There was children in that house that they bombed. But guess what? Guess what, Hakeem? Guess what? They were armed. They shot at police. So whose logic are we going to use? China, bombing would be justified if they bombed the protesters. The protesters shot first. They had ARs. Like, I want to say specifically, they had AR-15s. I'm dead serious. I want to say it was that caliber of weapons that they were able to. They were militant. That's why the police resorted to a bomb, because they were too scared to face the rifles. And then
Wait, the police bombed them?
Yes!
That's amazing. What the
It was
fuck?
an IED. They made a bomb device. The bomb squad made a bomb device because that's the best way to get rid of a bomb. You just put another bomb on top of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And then you build concrete, right? So they put it in a fucking gym bag and dropped it on these people. And it wasn't just the bomb, it was the fire. It started a fire. That was the issue. And they let the entire, like, 2 blocks of this city burn, and then sold those contracts to redevelop them. So they fucking went out to the fucking contract holders and they built fucking project houses in their place. Why did a fucking 2 blocks have to burn because some people had arms and were fighting back against the police?
That's fucking crazy. What the fuck? So, okay, Black Liberation. Christian Movement for Life, they originally called. Communal Organization for Nature and Natural Living. Interesting. That's insane. The police fucking bombed American
There's
citizens.
video.
It's crazy.
You want to see the video?
What the fuck? Yes, I do. Aerial bombing is what they call it. Unfucking believable. Pay 1.5 million in 1996. That's it? Wow. What a fucking pathetic joke. Hold on.
There's the first source is from Democracy Now.
The court decided that the plaintiffs did not have a Fourth Amendment claim against the city because there was no seizure when the defendants dropped explosives in the plaintiff's building. Are you fucking kidding me? The city officials and police officers had qualified fucking immunity, but the city did not have qualified immunity from liability despite its officials being exempt. Okay, how about we just like get rid of that entirely? How about that? That'd be cool.
Injustice, liberal nonsense
What
for sure,
the
but not
fuck?
deserving what came next by any means. Over time, the group became increasingly militant, leading to numerous confrontations with law enforcement. The police used their unusual lifestyle as an excuse to surveil the group, amongst other violations of their rights. The group's headquarters was located in a row house in West Philadelphia, a residential area. Throughout the 1970s and early 80s, MOVE had multiple dramatic encounters with the police. The conflicts reached a critical point on May 13th, 1985, when after hours of unsuccessful attempts to resolve things peacefully, the police decided to bomb the house occupied by MOVE members,
You might show
including
the
children.
footage here.
The bomb, dropped from a police helicopter, ignited a fire that quickly spread out of control to neighboring areas. The fire was particularly bad.
Here you go. Footage. Ready?
Today marks the anniversary of one of Philadelphia's darkest days. The MOVE bombing happened on May 13th, 19.
What the fuck?
That is when the city dropped a bomb.
What the fuck?
So they dropped it and then it went off, right? So it wasn't a direct like bomb device, you know? They basically made a pressure cooker bomb and dropped it on this house, and it's the actual fire that was like the really bad part. But it collapsed the entire structure on top of these people with children inside.
Bombing happened on May.
But the children were like, one of the survivors was able to get the children like out first. So I think they they still got burns.
Bro, that's fucking crazy.
13th, 1985. That is when the city dropped a bomb on a home on Osage Avenue in West Philadelphia, where members of the MOVE organization lived. The bombing and fire that followed killed 6 adults and 5 children. It destroyed 61 homes. Today, a relative of one of the homeowners is kicking off a year-long 13-run challenge to honor the victims. He'll run 13 half marathons leading up to the 40th anniversary of the bombing next May.
Jesus,
wow, so you mean people
Christ.
affected by it do commemorations every year?
What the fuck, man? I'm surprised that didn't lead to people executing cops in the street.
I think one of the people involved in it was a cop killer, and that's why they were especially
Brutal about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say this would be it would be justified for the people of Philadelphia to go around killing cops after this. Like that would be totally justified in my opinion. This is fucking revolting. Like that's next fucking level.
Check this out. Yeah, literally local PD.
What the fuck?
Prevented fire crews for hours from putting it out. 61 homes in the neighborhood were completely destroyed, with the fire killing 11 people, including 5 children and Vincent Leapart. It remains one of the worst incidents of police violence in U.S. history, though American police are always itching to get their record.
That's like an older. I just found that trying to find stuff about the if they had arms.
Amazing. Yeah. Dynamite filled booby traps. Amazing.
There's a Penn State article here, and it says, in 1985, earned Philadelphia a reputation as the city that bombed itself.
Man, these guys sent booby trap dynamite to Rockefeller as well. Damn. Vials of sulfuric acid. Damn. Intended their bombs to be delivered on May Day.
Yeah. So in 1978, a standoff resulted in the death of 1 police officer and injuries to 16 officers and firefighters, as well as members of MOVE. 9 members were convicted of killing the officer, and each received prison sentences of 30 to 100 years. In 1985, another firefight ended when a police dropped 2 bombs onto a roof of the MOVE compound, a townhouse located, blah, 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 killed 6 MOVE members, 5 children, destroyed 65 homes. So, like I said, they did have guns. So, if we're going to justify the Tiananmen Square, as like, oh, but the cops shot first in this case, we'll say. So that's why it's bad now.
Yeah, I guess the police are totally justified in dropping those bombs on those kids because they shot at them first, I guess.
But see, like I said, this one I'll give because people don't know this happened.
Yes.
On police violence, surveillance, and protest crushing could easily fill an hour of content. American support of protest crushing abroad could fill 10. There is no historical instance in all of Chinese history that compares to the MOVE bombing. The U.S. police and military have been orders of magnitude more violent towards its own citizens advocating for their rights or otherwise living or existing in a way that angered the ruling and privileged classes of their day. Yet these are in no way propagandized internationally, let alone remembered internally, as much as the Tiananmen.
The Chinese police routinely disappear people. I think that's worse. I don't know.
Square event is in the West. That's my point here. It doesn't make either or okay. I'm just highlighting the hypocrisy of the feigned outrage that happens year in and year out, despite basically no coverage or remembrance of things that happened last week in the grand scheme of things. The legacy of Tiananmen Square is, unfortunately, currently in the hands of Western media and governments. They've been pushing the massacre myth. Outlets like the New York Times dutifully spread the myth.
Hey, Hakeem, I have some advice for you. State violence against people, bad. pretty simple. Details are irrelevant, really.
For the US government, in spite of the facts. The Columbia Journalism Review clearly shows that a lot of the reports about deaths in the square were based on bogus eyewitness accounts. Similar to what happened in Eastern Europe, behind the scenes there was support from the West, and particularly the US, essentially reinforcing the view that whoever doesn't align with American foreign policy and capital must be gotten rid of, no matter what the true will of even the protesters may be. China's economic boom softened the West's stance on the country since they could make money there.
That's
But the
why
idea that
China
is
doesn't exist anymore. The CCP
gone.
is dead now.
Please. It's the CPC.
especially politically repressive, still shapes how the Western world handles diplomacy and business with China. This stands in direct contrast to rogue states like the US and Israel, which do whatever they want internally as well as on the international stage with zero
America is a
consequences.
rogue
So what's the
state,
takeaway here?
apparently.
The United States, always lecturing the world on violating sovereignty or human rights, played a significant role in fanning the flames of discontent in China. We don't know yet the full extent, but through propaganda, covert actions, and destabilization efforts, the US followed its tried and true playbook, stoking unrest, then attempting to guide the resulting chaos in its favor. China's government does have to, and in many ways.
What's your opinion on China breaching international waters and attacking the Philippines?
Oh, I
You think
mean,
that's cool imperialism, or is that defending against
you know
America?
exactly what it's going to be.
I know.
It's going to be the Americans have these islands and do colonialism.
Yeah, that's exactly what it'll be. Yeah. All right.
Are you aware of a CIA psychological profile about you, sir? Would you be interested in hearing what the CIA had to say? This secret study portrays as a brilliant but dangerous megalomaniac who is likely to pursue his own aims in disregard of U.S. interests. He's an uncertain ally. Shall I go on, or would you prefer that I stop, sir?